All right, I'm going to play this little video. Give folks just a couple more minutes to sign in. This is a song written by someone as part of a music contest that I organized to celebrate the launch of the book.
Something in my dream last night told me to stick to my guns. I'd wrestle just to prove I'm right. I won't be needing anyone. I fear for the economy, so I'll run off to the mountain, get a job in forestry, and vote for libertarians. Why don't you do yourself a favor and look to where our freedom lies? Look to where our freedom lies. Look to where our freedom lies. It's on the backs of the hardworking. An open invitation to you. You're welcome if you're interested to join in on the grand pursuit of liberty and happiness. We'll talk about the good old days and a life of high society. Mama says it's only a phase, but I really like autonomy. Why don't you do yourself a favor and look to where our freedom lies? Look to where our freedom lies. Look to where our freedom lies. It's on the backs of the hardworking. In case you've been wondering how it's been working out for me, I'm 2 days in and I've bought a tractor. I don't have a farm, but why don't you do your
All right. Kayla, did you want to say a few words as we start, or should I jump right in?
So I'll just let everyone know that we're going to keep you all muted. And then at the end, after Matt has had a chance to talk and everything, then we'll do some questions. You can ask me them in chat, or you can, we can do some structured sort of unmuting of everyone. And thank you for joining us tonight, Matt. We're very happy to have you here. And I will mute myself now.
Okay. Well, thank you very much to Kaylee. I've been realizing over the last, I don't know, since the book's been published, basically, I've been kind of keeping my eye out for bears and bear-related news. And I realized that not a week goes by without some sort of like wacky bear story making international news. And so I've been starting these discussions with just kind of a noting of the bear story of the week. And this week, the bear story was took place in China, where a polar bear hotel has just opened. And so the idea is that you can check into this hotel, and from any room in the hotel, you have a window that looks out on some captive bears. So it's like a really crappy bear zoo in the middle of a hotel with a bunch of rooms circled around it. And aside from the animal cruelty aspects of that situation, which bother me quite a bit, it really underscored kind of a theme that I've been seeing over my time with bears. And that's that no matter where you are and no matter who you are, people in your immediate surroundings see bears as something very kind of like real, something authentic. They're very desirable, and they represent something to us. And yet, whenever we have them in our sights, we kind of mold them to suit whatever sort of a need we might have in the moment. And so we are good at projecting ourselves onto bears. We can think of bears as being something very kind of like fierce and out of a horror movie. We can think of them as kind of a noble symbol of an untamed nature. Or we can see them as, teddy bears, or, kind of comic bumblers like Baloo from the Jungle Book. And what we don't realize, there's an area of study being explored and kind of like coming into its own right now, called anthrozoology. And the idea is that rather than looking simply at human culture like an anthropologist would, there ought to be a less human-centric view of how the world works and how human societies are formed. And bears are a great example of that, because when we look at bears in a certain way that is based more in who we are as people, what we do is we have the potential to actually change those bears and to change them in ways that can be unnatural, and that can also kind of boomerang back on us. And that is part of what I'm going to talk about tonight. So that music that you heard in the beginning, that wrapped up just a moment or two ago, that was Heather Johnson. She's a young amateur musician, and she participated in a song contest I did called A Musician Walks Into a Bear to celebrate the launch of the book. So thank you to Heather. Thank you to Kaylee and the Gilford Public Library. I'd also like to thank, hey, there she is, Ben Franklin, the founding father of the American Library. And I would also like to thank cheetahs. Cheetahs are an amazing animal. Everyone knows that they are very, very fast. That's kind of like their thing. That's their brand. But people don't necessarily appreciate that after 4 billion or so years of evolution, a cheetah is not only the fastest land mammal on the planet, or land animal on the planet, but it's also been engineered to be about as fast as a land animal can be. It's got this just real superb design that allows it to accelerate to 60 miles per hour in a heartbeat. And you can see how this one here is kind of soaring over the ground. Every stride a cheetah takes carries it 23 feet across the ground. So that is very, very close to flight. So it's not only the fastest land animal, but the fastest that one can be. Another interesting thing about cheetahs is that they have a stronger bite, pound for pound, than a tiger. And those characteristics combined, those tools that it has at its disposal, means that it is the most successful hunter among all the big cats. So it's got a 50% success rate, which is fantastic. Half the time it goes hunting, it comes home with a great big meal. And because it's so fierce and so fast, if you were to have an unpleasant encounter with a cheetah, that would very likely be fatal for you, assuming that you did not have some sort of a creative tool to even up the odds. What is also interesting is that you would not likely die if you were to come into conflict with this animal here. This is an African wild dog. It's about 50 pounds, usually not fatal to humans. And that gives rise to this natural history mystery that I came across. Why is it when an African wild dog meets a cheetah over a kill, the wild dog eats while the cheetah retreats? Surely the cheetah can defeat a lone wild dog. It's half its size. It doesn't have the type of claws that a cheetah has, and it can't compete physically with the cheetah in many ways. The answer is that the wild dog has healthcare. So let me explain that for a moment. If a wild dog were to get into a fight with a cheetah and survive the encounter, the wild dog once injured, would still be able to participate in its pack. It would hang out with its pack. It would eat at the pack's table, share in the kills, and eventually it would heal up, presumably. And then it would once again be able to re-shoulder the burdens of keeping the pack going strong. In nature, that is what healthcare looks like. Cheetah, on the other hand, it's got this amazing hunting success rate. It's got this amazing speed, right? It's one of the coolest animals in the world. And so it doesn't have healthcare and it doesn't share. It's got kind of a different strategy for survival. And so if that cheetah were to fight that wild dog over that hypothetical kill, the cheetah would win the fight. But if the wild dog managed to just bite the cheetah on the paw and give it a sore paw in a way that adversely affected the cheetah's speed, then its hunting success rate would plummet and it would not be able to hunt. And a slow cheetah is destined to starve and to die. So I don't know if this particular cheetah is dead. Let's hope that it's sleeping. You can see it's got a radio collar there. So we have these two different strategies. The solitary cheetah doesn't have to share anything, but it also has to rely entirely on its own efforts to survive. A wild dog, on the other hand, a social wild dog, can rely on its others in the pack. So that leads us to think about this quality of sociability and how different species pursue that quality or implement that quality or don't. So what will an individual sacrifice to help others? So let's think about family groups. Let's think about aunts, as in uncles and aunts. An aunt will risk her life for her niece. Why is that? Well, we like to say that it's because of love and decency and morality. But from an evolutionary perspective, the niece will be defended by her aunt because they share genetic material. Niece carries about 25% of the genetic material of the aunt forward into the next generation. And evolution-wise, those genes, that DNA, just wants to replicate itself. It's very, very selfish, and it doesn't care that much about the life of the ant. It wants to move forward by any means necessary. And so in a sense, the ant is being manipulated into risking her own life in certain hypothetical situations in order to protect her niece. A mother has about 50% DNA similarity to her offspring, and so she will assume a higher degree of risk than an ant. So even a solitary animal like the cheetah will sacrifice itself to save its young and pass on that DNA. But interestingly, in many, many creatures, including the wild dog, this willingness to sacrifice extends outside of the family. So if you look at these wild dogs, they treat their unrelated pack mates as if they were family. Okay, so why would they do that? There's no DNA in common. What could cause them to sacrifice their food for someone that's virtually a stranger, just a friend in the pack? They sacrifice the food that amounts to the equivalent of healthcare. They'll sacrifice their safety by uniting against a larger enemy. That's like a rudimentary military. And they'll also sacrifice time to babysit each other's young, which is an example of a sort of universal childcare. So we can see the most extreme form of self-sacrifice in another creature, in the ant. Ants are amazing. And while a lone ant is strong, it's not a match typically for spiders or grasshoppers or praying mantises. That is, until you consider the ant as part of a colony. And an ant colony is genetically identical. They all share the same DNA, hundreds of thousands of daughters working off of a single DNA blueprint. So because the DNA is identical, the individual organism will sacrifice itself to defend any other ant. And so it's essentially one cluster of genes defending itself. So which of these strategies is more successful? Is it something like the ant, or is it something like the cheetah? Well, this map tells the story. You can see the global ant distribution is every place marked in red, which is basically every place with a couple of frigid zone exceptions. And inset into the bottom right here, you can see a pullout of the map of Africa with tiny little colored blotches representing the entire range of different cheetah populations. In fact, in the entire world, there are only about 7,100 cheetahs, but there are literally 1,000,000 billion ants. So that is a quadrillion ants. The myrmecologist E.O. Wilson, who's also a great naturalist, says that ants have the highest biomass of any species on the planet. That means that if you were to weigh up all the ants on one side, that they would outweigh all of the humans on the other side, or all of the cheetahs certainly, or blue whales, or any other sort of organism that you would care to name. That's how successful an ant is. That's the power of cooperative action and self-sacrifice and universal military support, healthcare, and childcare. So what about humans? Well, humans are also one of my favorite animals. Humans are amazing. We alone, out of any species on the planet, have the power to choose our social structures. We can decide whether we want to be more like the ant. And in fact, some societies, like authoritarian China and Russia, have pursued that in modern history. They've come up with maxims like from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. And that has been one extreme, real emphasis on the group, the community, rather than the individual. But libertarians have a theory that the opposite end of that spectrum, all capitalism, all free market is best, minimal government, heavy emphasis on the individual's ability to provide for him or herself. The cheetah has the high success rate. Well, yeah, if you're not a very good hunter and you're a cheetah, you're not going to make it. But as a result of those hard conditions, most cheetahs are pretty darn good hunters. So they would say probably to each according to his ability needs be damned. And what you're looking at here is a flag, kind of an unofficial flag that the libertarian community has taken on. You know, don't tread on me. The idea is that these solitary porcupines are out there doing their own thing. They don't mess with you, but if you mess with them, you're going to get a snout full of quills. So let me introduce myself. My name is Matt. 12 years ago, I was working as a merchandiser. That means that I was one of these guys who would show up in your local supermarket at 5 in the morning before the doors opened, and I would rearrange products to accommodate new products. So that means that if Lay's had a new, broccoli flavored potato chip to put on the shelf, I would be given a little map and I would have to rearrange the Lay's potato chip shelf space to perhaps, cut down the number of barbecue chips from 4 to 3 and then get the broccoli flavor in there and make that work. It was a terrible job. I made about $10 an hour. Sometimes when I did this, I was in physical pain. I was in physical pain because I had a recurring abscess deep in my lower right jaw. And so when the pain got too bad, I would sterilize a thumbtack over a flame, and I would kind of pull my lip back, and I would jam that thumbtack as deep into my jaw as I could get it. I had to punch it through that skin. The skin there is very tough, so that the pus and the blood could just kind of squirt out. And then I would be good, sometimes for months. And that was my access to dental care, because I was working as an independent contractor. My company took no responsibility for my health care. And 12 years ago, I lived in a country and a state, this being the state of Maine and the country of the United States, that did not offer healthcare as a human right. So today I'm doing a little bit better. I'm a journalist and an author. You see me here. I'm speaking with a traditional goat herder in Morocco. We didn't share a common language, so she spoke to me in goats and flowers, which I appreciated very much. I've learned that Morocco also does not offer healthcare to most of its citizens. In fact, about 84% of Moroccans have no health care, so her health problems were likely much worse than my infected jaw. But that is the sort of society that Morocco has chosen to build. So I've written a book about libertarians, and you may know this. It's called A Libertarian Walks into a Bear. It's been a success. I've been invited onto a lot of media outlets to talk about this book. Bears seem to be really fun to talk about. And I've learned in interactions with audiences and readers that the book is really appealing to a very particular sort of person, a very weird sort of person. And here you all are. So this idea that this is appealing to quirky people became apparent when I did that song contest that I mentioned earlier. The Musician Walks into a Bear song contest. And to demonstrate the oddness of the audience for this book, I'm going to share with you a video from one of the contestants. It's not his actual musical song entry, but he did this by way of an introduction of himself to say that he wanted to participate in the song contest. So here is his video.
Making it in the rap game is hard in 2020. Times are crazy, man. It's hard to cut through all the noise. My name's Tall Carl. I'm a rapper. I'm from Arnold, Missouri. A lot of my lyrical subject matter comes from the darkest places in my life. I've dealt with a lot of trauma, you know, and this is the only way I've been able to talk about it. When I was really young, I lost my twin brother in a load of laundry, and it tore my whole family apart. I was in a downward spiral for years until I met Short Greg. He's my promoter and my manager now. Turned my whole life around. Music is everything to me. I try to write every day. If I had to compare myself to another artist, it would probably be a combination of Jay Dilla, Sade, and I think definitely Igor Stravinsky. I think the Musician Walked into a Bear competition is going to be an exciting challenge. Once I started reading the book, I couldn't put it down, giving me a lot to draw on. There are a lot of talented musicians involved, and I'm looking forward to hearing what they come up with.
All right, so that's Tall Carl, the rapping sock puppet who incidentally was awarded the victory by an independent judge of panels. So A Libertarian Walks into a Bear is a true story. Talks about an encounter involving libertarians and bears in the town of Grafton. So libertarians stand for minimal government. They want low taxes, few regulations. And my story really kind of picks up in 2004. Libertarians had a problem that there's never been like a nation ruled by libertarians. They've never been in charge of a state. There hasn't even been a libertarian city, not really, that they could point to and show people how libertarian ideals could work. The closest thing there is on earth to a libertarian city is Hong Kong. So that's an administrative region recognized as one of the most capitalistic places in the world. It's got very low taxation and free trade. On some measures, it does very well. The average income there is really, really high. But the key is that that is the average income. And the CIA ranks Hong Kong as one of the worst places in the world on the measure of income inequality. So you can see this picture really exemplifies that, because there are these beautiful skyscrapers in the world that are one reason that it has the highest concentration of ultra high net worth individuals in the world. It's just lousy with billionaires. but it also has these shanty towns, like we see in the foreground here. So clearly, a pure capitalist society seems to work for some people, or at least that's what Hong Kong would suggest. So the libertarians said, yo, we think we can do better than Hong Kong. That's not really scratching the libertarian itch. We think that we could instead create our own utopian community. If we could build a utopia for libertarians, we'll call it America's first free town, we will have a shining jewel to show the world. This is what libertarianism looks like. And they envisioned proud cheetahs and porcupines living the free life. And they knew, even though this was a national discussion, they zeroed in on New Hampshire right away, because it is, after all, the live free or die state. And it's got favorable taxes, and you don't have to wear a seatbelt, all this stuff. So the libertarians started kind of sending out a scouting party, and they drove around in Grafton, or drove around rather in the state, looking for towns, evaluating about 24 different towns. One of the places they considered was Grafton. So what's Grafton look like? This is a charming, bustling little place. This is actually Grafton, Massachusetts. Here's Grafton, New Hampshire. So you can see here, this is the town garage. This next to it with a red roof, that's the fire station. This here, this house-looking structure is all of the municipal services, tax collector and secretary and all that sort of stuff. And then this little adjunct building here that looks like the addition you built once your kids got out of college. That is the police station. So that's where the town has one full-time police officer, the police chief, and that is where he works out of. So it's a pretty modest town. So where is Grafton? Oh, actually, and I should say too, this is the only retail establishment in Grafton. The Grafton Country Store, which has since closed down. So it's once again, it's a modest rural community. It is 12 hours walking from the Gilford Public Library. It would obviously take a bear a lot less than 12 hours to make that walk. One bear in my book travels 1,000 miles in a single season, so this would be nothing. Bears are practically could have a single territory that encompasses or touches on the outer limits of both Grafton and Gilford. And so that's relevant because Grafton's bear problems are, in a sense, Gilford's bear problems, because if Grafton impacts the culture of the bears living in that region, then those bears are also existing in your space there in Gilford. So I first became aware of Grafton. I was working for my local newspaper. They sent me out to Grafton to talk to a woman named Jessica Soul. Jessica was a Vietnam War era veteran of the United States military, and she was having a dispute with the VA because she was, by this point, wheelchair bound, and the VA was not making her home accessible to her satisfaction. So she wanted some public attention to come to this plight that she was in, and the newspaper sent me. So when I came and spoke to Jessica about her VA situation, we were kind of like chit-chatting about her cats, good icebreaker because I love cats. And she said, well, I used to let the cats outdoors, but that was before the bears came. And I kind of perked up. I said, I've never heard someone say that quite like that before. What do you mean before the bears came? And she started to tell me about an amazing, to my ears, set of bear encounters that she had there in this house. And so I said, well, who wants to talk about the VA anymore? Well, let's talk bears. So she told me about, you know, how when she was younger, about 15 years previous, a bear had come out of the undergrowth in her backyard and snatched up a kitten and killed it right within her sight. She talked about a bear that was sitting on her handicap accessibility ramp, her wheelchair ramp at the front of her house that she had a harrowing encounter with while she tried to get her mail. And she also talked about a bear that tried to force its way into her home through her back porch. And kind of like broke its paw through a little entryway and was kind of like grasping around, trying to get something to eat. And so I thought that that was pretty amazing. And I started asking other people in town about their bear encounters, and everybody had fun bear stories. And as I talked to people, I wondered why these sorts of stories were happening in Grafton so much more often and to so much of a greater degree than in other places that I was more familiar with. And that kind of led me to learn more about the Free Town Project, the only other unusual thing happening in this community. So here we can see a little bit more of Jessica. So these are some of the folks who were involved with the Freetown Project. Top left, this is Rosalie Babiars and her husband, John Babiars. They are longtime Grafton residents. You might have heard of John Babiars before. He has run for governor several times on the Libertarian ticket. He is also the local fire chief, which means that he operates out of this, this red roof structure. Down in the bottom left here, there are two pictures of Bob Hull, who before he died just a couple years ago was the a New Hampshire state representative. And before he was a New Hampshire state representative, he was one of these people scouting the different communities in New Hampshire, looking for a place to found the Freetown. With him was Tony Lekas, who was another founder / scouter for the Freetown. He is also in the state legislature. And then this guy off on the right, the kind of crappy picture, that is a mugshot of Lawrence Edward Pendarvis, known as Larry Pendarvis. He was a very extreme personality. In fact, he went by the fake name Zach Bass because he didn't want people to know about some child pornography accusations that had plagued him in his home state of Florida. And he was also a mail order bride business owner. And let's see, what else about Larry Pendarvis? I don't know, he would come in and he would like do these, stake out these positions that didn't matter, but that were very provocative. Like he would say he thought consensual cannibalism should be legal, legalized in Grafton, or, they should allow for duels, public duels, or gladiator-like combats with poor people that he called bum fights. So just, I don't know, organ trafficking and drug trafficking, all the crazy, nutty libertarian ideas that you can think of, he was a big proponent for. So these folks came, they sat down with the Babiarses in the fire station. They said, we're thinking about making the Freetown here. What do you think? Babiars said, oh, I love it. This sounds like more votes in my pocket for the next time I run for governor. Yes, please do. And this was kind of a private meeting among people. It was held in a public building, but it didn't have any public notice or really any public involvement. And so when the Freetowners settled on Grafton, they started coming in, they just kind of started popping up. And people didn't realize that this was happening until it was happening. One of the things that appealed to them about Grafton was Grafton has no zoning laws or regulations. And so the folks who came in, who tended to be kind of like unattached to their lives wherever they came from, they would come in and they could live in whatever sort of a structure they liked. So they started to erect little camps in the woods of tents and yurts and shipping containers and makeshift cabins and mobile homes and all campers, just all sorts of non-traditional living situations. And so then things in Grafton started to change a little bit. One of the early changes that took place involved the ownership of the town's best historic asset. This is the Grafton Center Meeting House, also known as the Grafton Church, built in 1798. You can see the beautiful steeple on it, kind of like the heart and soul of the town in many ways. For 200 plus years, this was where Graftonites had gone to be baptized, to be married, to be memorialized in death. It was a very sacred place for the town. But a Freetowner named John Cannell, who was a retired worker from a chemical factory, Stahl Chemical, down near Boston, he came and he bought this for $68,000. It was for sale, but the town didn't want to buy it because they didn't want to spend taxes because they were very thrifty. And so he came in and he kind of snapped it up. And even though he didn't have any religious training, he said, I'm going to continue to operate it as a church, and therefore I qualify for religious exemptions, and therefore I don't have to pay taxes. And I'm going to live in it as its pastor. And that touched off a several years long battle over whether or not he was going to have to pay taxes on this property. And the battle was made more difficult by the fact that he did not recognize the IRS as a legal entity and therefore refused to fill out any paperwork related to the IRS. So he couldn't get tax status for himself in that way. So what changes did these folks make when they came to Grafton? Well, they basically challenged every tax dollar and regulation in the town. And even though they didn't constitute a majority of the town, they found a lot of allies among people who were just kind of fiscally conservative, people who were willing to not spend a dollar of the town's money. We're all familiar with that debate at our town meetings. So they turned off the streetlights because they didn't want to pay the electric bills. They cut the planning board budget by 95%. They put real strangleholds on the budgets of the police department, the fire department, the road department. These were all initiatives that they undertook. And meanwhile, the town culture was kind of shifting. There was less of this sense of shared sacrifice. They were going more towards a place of cheetahs and porcupines. So what was the result of their influence in the town? Before we get into that too much, let's just talk for just a second about bears. So bears, like humans, cheetahs, porcupines, and ants, are amazing animals. A bear can bend a car door in half. It's so strong, right? We love that about them. They're also so fast. They can spot the world's fastest man, Usain Bolt. They can give him a 25-meter head start and a 100-meter dash and still catch him well before the finish line. They are also very, very smart. Bears are smarter than we think. Ben Kilham of Lyme, New Hampshire, is a world-renowned bear expert. He has spent a lot of time among the bears. He says that bears can count to 12, which would make them smarter than apes. He also says that bears can work out kind of complicated adoption arrangements. If a mother bear doesn't have enough food in her territory to care for her young, she'll arrange with another bear to raise that young in maybe a more nutrient-rich environment. And another example of how smart they can be is Charles Darwin cites in his famous evolution book an example of a bear in a zoo that had a little stream running past the zoo. and the bear saw a crust of bread floating down the stream, and it reached out with its paw and it kind of like churned the water to create a current that drew that crust of bread into where the bear could snatch it. So that's like amazing intelligence, to have the foresight of what's going to happen and to do that. And you know, bears don't do that on instinct, right? And in fact, that's one of the interesting things about bears is most animals operate mostly on instinct. Bears have a lot of gray matter in their skulls, just like people. This means that they're problem solvers. Crows are another example of that. They're opportunists. When one food source dries up, they can explore another food source. They can change their behavior. And one of the things that they've learned over the course of human history in the United States is to avoid people, right? They're smart, but they're very, very timid. And in fact, at the time the Freetown Project began, there had not been a bear attack on a human in the state of New Hampshire for about 150 years. But these opportunistic creatures were suddenly seeing in Grafton a new set of opportunities. All of those odd living situations off in the woods, they all managed their food and their food waste in their own way. They were kind of exercising their personal liberties, but that meant, you know, that they could just not really go with the flow of society and deciding how to store their food and food waste. So that presented an opportunity to bears. They also, another interesting thing about the Freetowners was when a bear came snooping around, they also came up with their own individual solutions for how to drive a bear away. So some of them put cayenne pepper on their garbage so that the bear would get a snoop full of pepper and run away. Others just, you know, shouted and scared them off. Other people set booby traps to cause pain to the bears, or electric fences, or chase them off with a guard llama, or throw firecrackers at their heads. You know, all sorts of like colorful and creative bear deterrents. But what they all had in common was that none of them involved calling the state. And so most places in the state of New Hampshire, if there's a problematic bear, somebody drops a dime to Fish and Game. Fish and Game will, in many cases, send an expert out, a warden who's been trained in bear activity, and that warden will make a determination of how to get that bear out of its problematic behavior patterns. So sometimes that is shooting the bear, sometimes that's trapping and relocating the bear, sometimes it's telling a knucklehead to bring in their bird feeder. And that process, that check on bear behavior was largely absent in Grafton because the idea of calling the state to solve your individual problem very much goes against the grain of the libertarian philosophy. And then in addition to those kind of twin opportunities shaping the behavior of the bears in the region, there was a woman named Donut Lady that I refer to in the book. And Donut Lady was feeding the bears, not accidentally, but on purpose. Every day, she was a delightful woman. She would pick up 2 heavy buckets full of grain, topped with sugar donuts, and she would go out to a preset feeding place and she would feed the bears. And there would be a pack of bears. A group of bears is actually called a sleuth. So there would be a sleuth of bears waiting for her, jostling for space, like dogs around the dinner bell or around the dinner plate. And she would feed them, and just for the joy of watching them eat, because she thought they looked hungry. And so she did this twice a day so regularly that the bears in her area didn't even hibernate. They came all winter long because there was this great food source. And she was not alone in Grafton. There were many people in Grafton who were also feeding the bears. So this all had the effect of training the bears to look to humans for food. And while bears are naturally timid, when you encourage a lot of bear-human interactions, you're creating more places and more possibilities that increase the mathematical chance that one of them will go wrong in some unexpected way, and somebody's going to get hurt. So this is a woman named Tracy Colburn. She came out one day or one night at 10 o'clock at night to let her dog out to pee. And there were 3 bears on her porch. And 2 of the bears ran away. They were probably grown cubs. Her dog attacked the 3rd bear. The 3rd bear was defending itself right on her porch, which you can see in the background there. Tracy had heard that the right way to deal with a potentially dangerous black bear is to act aggressively, to kind of be intimidating, look strong. And I think we've all heard that advice, and that is typically good advice. But when she stood and started screaming at the bear, it already felt pinned down by the dog. And so it charged her and it attacked her. You can see the bandages on Tracy's wrists. This is in the aftermath of the attack. And those bandages cover some very serious wounds. The bear kind of like, she had like kind of like defensive wounds caused by the bear's paw. And she credits the dog with saving her life. And as it was, when the bear did make its eventual escape, fortunately, it didn't press the attack on Tracy, but she was in a real pickle because cell phones naturally do not work well in Grafton. She could not afford a landline. She had to choose between landline or cell phone. She went with cell phone because it has more functionality, even though she can't always use it at home. So she was caught at 10:30 at night with wounds on her arms that were bleeding so badly that she was in very real danger of bleeding out and no way to call for help. And so in my book, I tell the story of how she dealt with that situation. And spoiler alert, she survived. We can see that here. So that was one impact of the Freetown Project. What were some others? So there were leaks in the town office roof because the town couldn't afford to repair its municipal building. The police chief had to stand up at a town meeting and say that he had not been able to keep his cruiser on the road for the entire year because he hadn't been able to afford needed repairs. And you remember the Sacred Church, the historic asset from 1798 that John Cannell bought for $68,000. This is what happened to that church. And it's as tragic as these pictures make it seem. In fact, it was even more tragic because this fire, which broke out there in 2016, also claimed the life of John Cannell. State authorities have not completed their investigation after 5 years, which suggests that the possibility of arson is still a live possibility. They're probably still waiting for someone to come forward. So you can see the church before and after, very, very sad. So there were more impacts in town. In fact, almost anything that you can measure in the town, in a municipality's health, suffered during the Freetown Project years. The number of neighbor complaints went up, the number of recycling rates went down, the number of registered sex offenders tripled, the legal expenses went up because they kept getting sued. County law enforcement found a meth lab in the woods in Grafton. And Grafton had not had a murder in living memory like many small New England towns. But during the Freetown Project, one resident called her roommate a freeloader and became the victim of the town's first murder in living memory when the accused freeloader shot and killed her. And then that was followed immediately by the second murder in living memory in the town because that same guy murdered his other roommate using the same firearm. This is a picture from the Valley News where I used to work. Please support your local newspaper. It's very important. This shows the aftermath of a road rage incident. You can see the 2 vehicles here. The drivers of them were getting involved in sort of a aggressive stop and start thing where they're pissing each other off. They eventually stopped their vehicles and got out to, yell at each other. One of them punched the other one, and the guy who got punched, who happened to be a Freetowner, shot the other guy in the stomach. Both of the men had small children in their cars at the time. Another impact that happened not in Grafton, but in the neighboring town of Groton, This is April Rogers. She is 71 years old here. She lived in a mobile home in Grafton. And one night at 3 a.m, she heard some noises in her kitchen. So she got into her wheelchair and she went out there to investigate. And there was a bear in her kitchen. And she did not do what Tracy did. She said, I'm just going to sit here calmly and not be a threat. And then the bear will go away. But the bear did not go away. The bear was agitated by her presence. And she said, it just let me have it. You can see this is what April looks like post-attack. Very serious attack. She is very lucky that she did not die from this bear attack. And since I have published this book, there's been a third bear attack in the region, in another neighboring town, where a guy was getting his air conditioner on a hot night this past June, and the bear attacked him, scratched his back, and happily he did not, it was not a serious attack. He was not badly injured. So I will wrap up by saying humans are the only animal with the power to choose what sort of a society they want to build. Do we want to be more social or more solitary? What sort of sacrifices do we want to make for others in our community? I understand the appeal of rugged individualism and the value of it, but at least when we're talking about bear management, and I would think in many other areas, things are best managed through collective action and strategies. People of Grafton would have benefited from rules about keeping their waste in their food, using experts to help resolve problems when they arise, and other measures like that. So the Freetown Project ended in 2016, but I did find signs of life in the Grafton Library. You can see this very nice building here. That is the library from Grafton, Massachusetts. This is the Grafton, New Hampshire library, and I'm running a little bit past the time that I had hoped for. I often end with a reading about this library and its value, but I will just tell you very quickly that while neighboring towns spend about $150,000 on their library, the Grafton Library gets between $10,000 and $15,000 a year from taxes. This little porta potty is its only restroom facility. It's only open during the work week for 3 hours a work week, Wednesday mornings from 9 to 11. And I spent a lot of time, a lot of Wednesday mornings in that building. And for all its decrepitude, it really represented to me kind of like a spark of civic pride and life. This was where people came to be a community and to have those discussions and to think and to learn and to educate themselves. Kaylee did not pay me to say this, but I would ask you to please continue to support your local library. The Gilford Library, I'm sure, plays just as vital a role in its community as the Grafton Library plays there. I will now take any questions that you guys might have. Oops. There we go. Haley, do we have any questions from the chat?
Didn't have any in the chat. If anyone has a question that they'd like to ask, but they don't want to turn on their camera or they don't want to turn on their microphone, you can ask it in the chat. The chat should be on the bottom of your screen. It looks like a little message bubble. Or you can use the reaction button and raise your hand. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, or if your video is on, you can also raise your hand and I can unmute you that way. Does anyone have a question?
Haley, while they're thinking about whether or not they have a question, tell me what you're reading. I'm always so interested to hear what a librarian is doing these days. Tell me something good.
I have like 3 true crime books out at home. I have, what else do I have? I have a couple of fiction crime books. I have a lot of crime books right now.
What are crime books? Like Michael Connelly?
No, so I have 2 Ellie Griffiths. and the true crime that I have is Anne Rule, and the other one is by, oh, what is her name? It's the one about Israel Keys is the other one that I have. So that one's
Oh, Tess Gerritsen.
no.
Oh,
Maureen, what is her name? It's called American Predator.
oh, I'll have to
That
check
one,
that out.
who wrote that one? What
But
is
now,
Maureen
now-
Callahan? That's the one.
now I
Oh
see
yeah.
if
Okay,
it's-
so I have two questions.
Maureen Callahan,
Um,
I will check it out.
So Jay, I think you're unmuted.
Yes, you mentioned supporting your public library. I live in Meredith, and I read a review of your book in the Boston Globe, and I requested that the Meredith Public Library purchase the book and add it to their collection, which they did. I was the first one to read it, and my wife also read it, and we loved it. So any of those of you in your audience tonight who have not read it, we highly recommend it. You will
Oh.
enjoy it.
Jay, your check is in the mail.
All right.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Yeah, no, I've been really delighted at the response. You know, I think it's been a really fun conversation that I've managed to have with folks. I wonder, did any of the characters in particular stand out to you?
Donut Lady and the guy in the church.
Yeah. Yeah, Donut Lady, I've heard a lot about. People really love her because, you know, even though she's doing this thing that is probably detrimental to both the bears she's trying to help and her neighbors, she's like, you know, she's doing it because she likes bears, and who doesn't kind of like get that, you know, get the impulse to see bears.
And the bears were great characters that I remember as well.
I've got
What happened to them?
question.
My
up
wife
above.
wanted to add something. Well, no, that's a spoiler alert. She doesn't want to say it. Go ahead. Thank you.
So I've got
Thank
a
you, Joy.
question from Catherine. I can see you have your hand raised.
Yes, and then I think, well, Ruth was asking a couple of
Yep.
questions, but
I've
I
got
just
some in the
wanted,
chat too.
yeah, I just wanted to clarify, is the Free Town project related to the Free State project?
That is an excellent question, and people do often conflate the two. In fact, they are pointedly not related to one another, but that's like a little misleading to just say no. The Free State project is happening obviously on a much greater scale. It is its own organization, and it is not formally associated with the Freetown project in any way. They definitely don't want to accept any responsibility for any of the Freetown project's failings. And yeah, they're more sophisticated. They have a little more funding. They have a little more polish, and they've been at least smart enough to cut out some of the more controversial viewpoints that would really be a turnoff, like consensual cannibalism. They would never be advocating for that. The Freetown project, ironically, is kind of what killed, or rather the Free State project is what killed the Freetown project. Once that project was triggered in 2016, the libertarians who were coming to New Hampshire from all around the country always used to have Grafton as kind of like the only ideal landing pad. But now libertarians could go anywhere in the state that they wanted to. And why would they go to Grafton? It was beshitted by bears, right? And so they typically chose to live in places like Keene that have more robust public services because those are nicer places to live, which is a little ironic, but there you have it. The Free State project killed the Freetown project.
So I had
Thank
a
you.
question from Ruth as well on basically how the Freetown project came to an end, but then she also asked, did those Freetown people who moved into Grafton later spread out into other parts of New Hampshire?
Yeah, well, you know, there was kind of like a constant trickle in, trickle out dynamic sort of happening. Like folks would come to Grafton and then they would either grow disillusioned with the amount of progress that they were taking, or they would get into squabbles with the neighbors, or just they would find that, you know, living in a camp in the woods is not as rewarding an experience. And maybe I need to go, you know, get a job in Manchester or something like that. So there was not a targeted, but there was a general ongoing diffusion of of those folks into other parts of the state. And that's continued more or less throughout. And so we do see them all around the state these days. They have become, quite active in state government. They take credit for a lot of initiatives at the statewide level, including very colorfully the latest flying car regulation. New Hampshire became the first state in the union to legalize, I forget exactly what the phrase is, but it's like cars that you can fly. And so, their work continues.
And then I had a question from someone else. There appears to be a growing libertarian presence in this community. How do you suggest we respond protectively and proactively?
Yeah, I really think, I poke a lot of fun at the libertarians. But I really do feel like, even though I think they're quite silly, my starting proposition in life is kind of like that we're all silly, right? Like myself included. And I also discovered that I want libertarians in my society because I like to have that voice out there that acts as sort of a check against government overreach. I don't want to live in a place like authoritarian China. And libertarians give us kind of a gut check of, geez, is that too much? Is that too much limitation on personal freedom? Is that too much government encroachment? That's a valid point of view, and I'm glad that it's part of the discussion. But at the same time, I would never want to live in a place run by libertarians because I want healthcare and I want an education system and I want roads that work. So in that sense, I really, value their voice, but don't want to live under their rule or in their society. I forget, what was the actual question? I think I was circling back to the point.
Yeah, basically, how do we respond to
yes.
the growing movement?
So I would encourage people to find the commonalities with the libertarians in their community. I would not treat them as if they are aliens from another planet. They are human beings. They have values and principles, and some of them are quite principled, even though they draw very different conclusions or their principles might differ from you. You probably have a lot of common ground. We're all watching the Tiger King, right? And the thing that I'm most worried about in America is the siloing of people and this kind of like real extreme separatism. And I find that the more olive branches you extend, there's going to be a certain hardcore group at the center of the extreme fringe that you're never going to be able to touch, right? But if you start just saying all libertarians are evil, you're driving people into their arms, right? Like a lot of very reasonable people will say, yeah, I have some libertarian tendencies. And, I do too, because I like, gay marriage. I support same-sex marriage. That's a view that the libertarians staked out many, many years ago. So there is some common ground. And when you can talk about things with kind of a positive attitude, I think that you can build bridges that both salvage the best parts of libertarianism and also serve to prevent it from getting the sort of energy that would cause it to run amok. I don't know. I just kind of feel like in cultural spaces, it's important to, be out there, be a friendly face, and acknowledge the right and oppose the wrong. That's the only thing that works.
Yeah, I think that's.
Invite them to the library.
Well, thank you so much for speaking tonight, and thank you to everyone who attended.
Yes. Thank you very, very much. It's been a real joy. I enjoyed the questions tonight. And Kaylee, you've been a wonderful host. So kudos to you, and many thanks both to all of you wonderful folks supporting your local libraries and to the Gilford Library in particular for underwriting my appearance tonight.
And we do have a copy of your book at the library if you wanted to check it out.
Oh, just one?
I think just one. We are a small library. It might just be one. I'm not sure. It might be two. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
But thank you so much. And thank you to everyone and have a good night.
Yeah, I'm gonna play us out with a video
Okay.
as folks want to file out. This is another entry in the song contest. It's very mellow. It's not necessarily riveting, but I will let folks leave to that. And thank you all so much. It's been a delight. Thanks, folks.